I trusted him with every part of my life, my heart, my future, even my silence. And I had no idea I was living inside someone else's carefully constructed lie. For years, I thought I was in a normal relationship, not perfect, but real. The kind where you forgive small mistakes, ignore tiny red flags, and tell yourself that love is about compromise. I believed that loyalty was mutual, that honesty was automatic, that betrayal was something that happened to other people. I was wrong. Looking back now, the signs were always there. The late nights he brushed off as work stress, the sudden password changes, the way he would tilt his phone just slightly away from me, like a reflex he didn't even notice anymore. At the time, I didn't call it a double life. I called it trust. We met in the most ordinary way possible. No dramatic spark, no movie moment, just two people who clicked slowly, naturally. The kind of connection that felt safe. And that's what made it dangerous. He made me feel chosen. He listened, he remembered details, he held my hand in public and looked proud to be seen with me. I built my world around that version of him, the man I thought I knew. Our relationship drama never looked dramatic from the outside. No screaming matches, no obvious toxicity, just quiet adjustments. Me shrinking my needs, me explaining away his distance, me convincing myself that love sometimes feels lonely. That's how betrayal really works. It doesn't explode, it erodes. I remember the first night I felt something was wrong. He was sitting next to me, scrolling through his phone, smiling at something I wasn't part of. When I asked who it was, he said, "Just a work thing," too quickly. Not defensive, just rehearsed. That was the moment my intuition whispered, not screamed, just whispered. Still, I stayed, because I believed in the relationship, because walking away felt harder than staying confused, because I didn't yet understand that I was sharing my life with someone who was living another one entirely. I didn't know I was standing at the beginning of a long road, a road paved with lies, emotional manipulation, and a kind of betrayal that doesn't leave bruises, but scars your trust forever. And I definitely didn't know that the quiet patience I was learning would eventually become the most powerful form of revenge I never planned to take. At that point, I still believed karma was something abstract, something slow, something optional. I had no idea how personally it was about to arrive. At first, nothing about our life together looked broken. From the outside, it probably looked boring, in a good way. Two adults building something stable, predictable, safe. We had routines, Sunday grocery trips, late dinners eaten half warm, shared jokes that didn't need explaining. I learned how he liked his coffee. He learned how I went quiet when something bothered me. That's how deep the relationship drama ran. Quiet, unspoken, hidden behind normalcy. He wasn't cruel, that's important to say. People imagine betrayal as something violent or loud, but this kind was soft, calculated, polite. He'd say things like, "You're overthinking again," with a smile, or "Why are you always looking for problems?" And somehow I'd apologize for feeling uneasy. That's how gaslighting begins, not with lies, but with doubt. Whenever I asked about the distance between us, he blamed stress, work, family, life, and because I loved him, I believed him. Love makes you generous with excuses. I told myself this wasn't betrayal, that every relationship goes through phases, that commitment meant patience. But the cracks kept spreading. He stopped making plans beyond a few days ahead. When I talked about the future, he responded vaguely, not rejecting it, but never stepping into it either. It felt like I was standing still while he kept one foot pointed somewhere else. That's when I started noticing patterns. His phone never left his hand, but never unlocked near me. He took calls in the other room. His schedule changed constantly, but the explanations stayed conveniently unclear. Still, I didn't accuse him. I didn't want to be that woman, the jealous one, the insecure one, the one who creates relationship drama out of thin air. So I swallowed it. That was my mistake. Because when someone is living a double life, your silence becomes their protection. I remember lying awake next to him one night, listening to his breathing, and wondering why I felt so alone while sharing a bed with someone I loved. That loneliness wasn't emptiness, it was warning. But I ignored it. I told myself trust mattered more than suspicion, that real love didn't involve keeping score or checking receipts, that karma would handle things if something was wrong. I had no idea karma was already taking notes. Looking back, this was the most dangerous stage, before discovery, before proof, when you sense something is wrong but don't yet have permission to believe yourself. Because during that phase, the person betraying you still controls the narrative. They decide what's real. They decide what's just stress and what's your imagination. And I let him. I didn't know yet that his secrets weren't small. They weren't momentary lapses. They were structural. An entire second life was forming behind my back, carefully hidden behind half-truths and emotional misdirection. And the closer I tried to hold on, the more invisible I became. That's when the tension truly began to rise, not with confrontation, but with awareness. And once you start seeing the pattern, you can't unsee it. The betrayal hadn't exploded yet, but it was already poisoning everything. And somewhere deep down, a quiet part of me started preparing for something I couldn't yet name. Not anger, not revenge, just survival. Once the doubt settled in, it changed everything. Not loudly, subtly. I started listening differently, watching patterns instead of words, and what I noticed made my chest feel tight in a way I couldn't explain. He became careful, not distant, strategic. When I asked questions, he answered smoothly, too smoothly, as if he had practiced them before I ever spoke. That's when I realized this wasn't just misunderstanding, this was control. He'd disappear for hours, then come back warm and affectionate like nothing had happened. It was confusing by design, because confusion keeps you compliant. Every time I felt hurt, he reframed it. You're too sensitive. You always assume the worst. You're turning nothing into relationship drama. And slowly, I stopped trusting myself. That's the most dangerous form of betrayal, when someone convinces you that your intuition is the enemy. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. Some days he was attentive, present, almost loving in a way that felt like a reward. Other days, cold and unreachable. I later understood that inconsistency wasn't accidental. It kept me off balance, grateful for crumbs, afraid to ask for more. That's how people maintain a double life. They make sure neither version of them ever sees the whole picture. The first real crack came accidentally. A notification lit up his phone while it sat face up on the table. A name I didn't recognize. A message preview that vanished too quickly. He noticed my expression immediately. Too quickly. "Oh, that's just a colleague," he said, casually picking up the phone. I nodded, because confronting him felt heavier than pretending. But something shifted after that. I started connecting dots I had ignored before. The weekends he was suddenly busy, the trips that didn't align with his schedule, the way he never invited me into certain parts of his life. It wasn't just secrecy anymore. It was compartmentalization. And the worst part? I was being slowly edited out of his future. I asked him once, carefully, if he was still happy with me. He smiled and said, "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" But he didn't touch me when he said it. That answer hurt more than an argument would have, because love doesn't sound rehearsed. At night, I replayed conversations in my head, trying to find the moment where I became optional, trying to understand how betrayal can exist without open cruelty. This wasn't chaos. It was structure. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about another person. This was about identity, about control, about living two truths and letting me drown between them. The relationship drama never exploded because he never let it. He kept everything just calm enough to avoid confrontation, just confusing enough to keep me silent. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means pressure, and pressure always builds. I didn't yet know how deep the double life went. I didn't yet have proof, but my body knew before my mind was ready to accept it. Something was coming, something that would end the version of me who kept making excuses. And once the truth surfaced, there would be no going back, because betrayal doesn't just break trust, it rewrites everything you thought was real. The truth didn't arrive in a dramatic explosion. There was no screaming, no confrontation, no confession. It arrived quietly, almost cruelly calm. I found out on a random weekday afternoon, the kind of day that's supposed to be forgettable. I was using his laptop to print a document, something I'd done dozens of times before. That's the thing about betrayal. It waits until you feel safe. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen, not a message, a calendar reminder. Dinner, 7:30 p.m., her place. No context, no explanation, just certainty. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold. My mind tried to reject what my eyes were seeing. I told myself there had to be another explanation, a work thing, a misunderstanding. But then I opened the calendar. That's when the double life stopped being a theory. There were weeks of entries, carefully spaced, different names, different places. 2 lives, one shared with me, one hidden in plain sight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen as everything I believed about my relationship rearranged itself into something ugly and undeniable. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a phase. This was a system. Every late night, every canceled plan, every time I felt too sensitive, it all made sense. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, scheduled, managed. I remember closing the laptop slowly, like any sudden movement might shatter what little composure I had left. Then I sat on the floor and waited for the feeling to hit. When it did, it was overwhelming. Not rage, not yet. It was grief. Grief for the version of myself who trusted without fear. Grief for the future I thought we were building. Grief for all the moments I blamed him for his absence. The relationship drama I tried so hard to avoid had been playing out without my consent the entire time. When he came home that night, I looked at him differently. Every word sounded rehearsed. Every smile felt like part of a performance I was no longer invited to believe in. He asked me how my day was. I said, fine. That one word held everything. I didn't confront him, not because I was weak, but because I finally understood something important. Confrontation would give him control. If I accused him, he would deny. If I cried, he would minimize. If I exploded, he would label me unstable. I wasn't ready to hand him that power, so I stayed quiet. That silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Because once you see the truth, you don't owe anyone your reaction. You owe yourself clarity. And in that moment, sitting across from a man living a double life, I realized something that changed everything. I didn't want answers. I wanted freedom. And freedom doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from patience. That was the night my heartbreak turned into resolve. The night grief hardened into focus. I didn't know yet how karma would arrive, but I knew I wasn't going to interfere with it. I was going to let him destroy himself, quietly. After that night, something inside me went completely still. Not numb, focused. I didn't change overnight. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I answered when he spoke. I played my role perfectly. That was my advantage. Because when someone is living a double life, they underestimate silence. They assume it means ignorance. They don't realize it can mean observation. I stopped asking questions, stopped seeking reassurance, and that made him relax. He became careless. He left his phone unattended more often, forgot small details about the lies he'd told, started contradicting himself without noticing. I didn't collect evidence for confrontation. I collected clarity. I watched how he treated me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, how he scheduled his time, how he spoke about the future without ever placing me in it. That was the real betrayal, not the other woman, but the way he erased me from his long-term plans while still using my presence for comfort and stability. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was revenge built on restraint. I quietly detached. I stopped rearranging my life around his schedule, stopped prioritizing his needs over mine. I rebuilt parts of myself he had slowly diminished. I reconnected with friends he subtly distanced me from, focused on my work, strengthened my independence. And here's the part he never saw coming. I let him believe everything was fine. People like him rely on emotional feedback, anger, tears, accusations. Silence makes them reckless. He grew bolder. The lies became sloppier, the excuses lazier. He underestimated how much I now understood about his double life. I remember one evening when he told me he'd be working late. I smiled and wished him luck. That night, he posted a photo online, not of himself, but the reflection in a mirror behind him told the whole story. Another woman's apartment, another life. I didn't confront him. I saved the moment in my mind and moved on. Because real revenge doesn't announce itself. It waits until the timing is perfect. I started making decisions that protected me, financially, emotionally, practically. I separated what needed to be separated, prepared for a life without him, while still sharing space with him. That was the power shift. He still thought he was in control, still thought the narrative belonged to him. But karma doesn't rush, it observes. And the more secure he felt, the closer he came to his own collapse. I wasn't plotting destruction, I was stepping out of the blast radius. By the time he noticed something had changed, it was already too late. Because once a woman stops fighting for explanations, she starts preparing for freedom. And freedom is the most dangerous thing to someone built on lies. Karma didn't arrive like a storm. It didn't need to. It arrived through exposure, slow, unavoidable, and entirely of his own making. When someone maintains a double life, they depend on timing and secrecy, and the moment they grow comfortable, both start to fail. He began slipping, missing appointments, mixing up stories, forgetting which version of himself he'd told to whom. I watched it happen from a distance I'd carefully created. One evening, he came home agitated, restless, checking his phone every few minutes. I asked what was wrong. He hesitated, then said, work stress. That lie sounded thinner than all the others. A few days later, everything unraveled. The other woman, the one I'd never spoken to, found out about me, not because I reached out, not because I warned her, because he forgot to delete something. A shared photo, a comment, a timestamp that didn't match his story. Suddenly, his carefully managed relationship drama collided with reality. She confronted him, he panicked, and when people panic, they tell the truth to the wrong person. He came to me that night emotionally disoriented, searching for sympathy he no longer deserved. He admitted mistakes, framed months of betrayal as confusion, asked for understanding. I listened, calmly, and then I told him something he wasn't prepared to hear. I know. That was it. No accusations, no raised voice. Just certainty. The power left him instantly. He tried to explain, to justify, to minimize, But explanations only work when the listener still wants to believe. I didn't. The truth had already done its work. The other woman left him, not dramatically, just decisively. She didn't want a man capable of maintaining a double life. Neither did I. And suddenly, he had no audience, no one to perform for, no one to lie to. That's the thing about karma. It isolates the guilty. His social circle found out slowly, not through gossip, through inconsistency. Stories didn't line up, timelines contradicted each other, trust evaporated, and the man who once controlled every narrative was now reacting to consequences he couldn't manage. He lost more than a relationship, he lost credibility. I didn't celebrate, I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was relief. Because revenge wasn't about hurting him, it was about no longer carrying the weight of his deception. I walked away without drama, without speeches, without closure he hadn't earned, and that was the final consequence. People like him don't fear anger, they fear indifference. By the time karma finished its work, there was nothing left for me to say. The story had ended itself. Walking away didn't feel empowering at first. It felt empty. When the noise stops, you're left alone with everything you ignored just to survive. And for a while, that silence was louder than any argument we never had. I replayed moments in my head, not to blame myself, but to understand how easily trust can turn into self-betrayal. Because betrayal doesn't start with lies. It starts when we're taught to doubt our own instincts. Healing wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches, no instant closure. Just quiet days where I learned how to exist without questioning my worth. I stopped asking why he did it. That question keeps you trapped inside someone else's psychology. Instead, I asked why I stayed so long after I felt something was wrong. That's where the real growth happened. I learned that relationship drama doesn't have to be explosive to be damaging, that manipulation often wears the mask of calmness, that someone living a double life isn't confused, they're calculated. But the most important lesson came from watching how karma works when you don't interfere. I didn't destroy him. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't become cruel to feel powerful. I simply stepped away and let the truth breathe. And the truth always does. Revenge, I realized, isn't about punishment. It's about liberation. The moment I stopped reacting, he lost relevance. The moment I chose myself, his narrative ended. I rebuilt slowly. New routines, stronger boundaries, a deeper respect for my intuition. I didn't harden, I sharpened. Because bitterness would have meant he still mattered, and he didn't. If there's one thing I hope someone listening takes away from this, it's this. If your peace constantly depends on your silence, you're not in love, you're in survival mode. Love doesn't require self-erasure. Trust doesn't demand blindness, and revenge doesn't need to be loud to be effective. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is dignity. I don't hate him. I don't forgive him either. I simply understand him now, and understanding freed me. So I'll leave you with this. If you discovered the person you loved was living a double life, would you confront them immediately? Or would you do what I did and let karma speak for you?